people are your biggest asset?
You can go to university, learn the basics, and I as a mentor or leader, I can teach you how to prescribe exercise well based on a presentation from another human being. Consistency and compliance to their plan. You can have this guy that goes to the gym every single day, lifting weights like an absolute muppet. Looks like an idiot. You know the guy, he's in everybody's gym, but he still gets strong and he still gets big. How do we get each and every one of these people working in their genius mode so that the outcome is a win?
And the genius mode is the individual's strengths and interests. There's an opportunity for transparency within team that co-workers, managers can better understand others to work better in the group. Thanks for joining us, Toby Atkins from Atkins Health.
My pleasure, man.
Appreciate it, mate. Thanks for your time for episode 1.
How good.
I appreciate it. Now, to start things off, mate, I just wanted to ask about Atkins Health. You are the founder and CEO of Atkins Health. Tell us a little bit about the story of you founding Atkins Health and what was the inspiration behind it?
Yeah, it's a good question, man. I guess for me, I got to go kind of almost even further back from that to actually be able to talk about the story of where the company came from. And that's, I guess, how I got into exercise physiology, which is my profession. And yeah, honestly, I graduated from exercise science, had no idea what I wanted to do with myself, just knew that I didn't want to be a physio, wasn't interested in the hands-on therapy, and I guess the stresses of diagnosing. So I actually uplifted, went to the mines, played around up there as a labourer, truck driver, all the kinds of weird and wonderful works that you get up there. And then, basically was just trotting around up there, kind of becoming stupider and stupider and stupider. Sounds weird, but genuinely, honestly, like the fact that I just wasn't using my brain, I felt myself going down into a rut, essentially. So got chatting to my mates, and one of my buddies was like, "Man, I'm going back to uni." And at first, I thought he was insane. Kind of like, "What are you doing that for?" And he's like, "Well, I can go back, do a 1-year degree on top of our exercise science degree, and I can do this thing called exercise physiology." I guess I was interested. He took me through the fact that you can, apply our knowledge that we've learned over 3 years into kind of clinical studies. And that kind of interests me for 2 reasons. One, love the human body. And as you know very well, I love the human mind, I guess, and psychology. I've always been fascinated by what makes people think the way they do. And I guess from there, my second reason was I came up with a business idea, funnily enough. Still haven't applied it to this day, so anyone listening could probably steal it, but that's all right. Was essentially to create like almost a kind of, I don't know, it's almost like this cross between an Uber model and a yellow directories, call it.
Okay.
So you may not even know this.
No, I don't think I know this one, mate.
Yeah. So the idea being that like pretty much as a professional looking for another professional, you could jump on just like Yellow Pages and be like, all right, I want a psychologist, a sports psychologist, right? And jump on, list out, obviously, sports psychologists on board, much like things like hot docs and things like that. But you could get to know and have more about the actual professional that you're looking for. So from a professional to professional, that was kind of what it was used for, right? Like you could just refer to one another and get more of an idea. So very similar to things like hot docs and those other kind of, directories. But the cool concept I thought of was oftentimes, like when it comes to medical and health, we just want an answer.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. So the microwave thing, like give me it right now.
Yeah, I just want it.
And
yeah, exactly. So the idea from that was like the Uber model kind of thing is like you could literally, as a practitioner, just clock on. And people, like clients, could post a question. And as a professional, you could bid to answer the question. And essentially, you could pay for the answer. And like different levels that you could answer, right? So there's like a simple answer. You could just get my opinion as a credible practitioner. You could get my opinion with a bit of background. bit of background research, or you could get a fully fledged, like, here's the answer, here's all the background evidence, and all that kind of, and you obviously pay different amounts for each of those kind of things, right? So this is my idea.
Okay.
But I was like, no one's going to listen to me. I hope I'm allowed to swear, mate. I don't know.
Mate, yeah. Where you go. We'll put a disclaimer at the start,
please do. Yeah. No, but I was like, no one's going to listen to me in the health world unless I'm a health practitioner.
Right.
So I was like,
so this is instead of people doing like Googling and WebMD and
pretty well
actually hearing from a professional.
Yeah, like getting rid of the whole Dr. Google concept.
Right.
And actually being able to almost do Google, but get an answer from a qualified professional without having to go and actually see them.
Yeah.
And have a consult. It might just be like a pure just an opinion or an answer. And I guess from the professional's perspective, it's cool because you could just do it like in your lunch break or anytime during the day. So anyway, I still think it's a pretty wicked idea.
Right. So it's advantageous for the professional because instead
money.
of doing Uber Eats where they can do as a second job outside of it, it's like, well, you can Uber answer questions outside of it. If you're doing shift work or after dinner or something like that, you could log on. I'm curious from the consumer's point of view.
Yes.
Because they're going, well, I can just do WebMD for free on Google.
Sure. Yeah.
But so is that like more of a premium service when you actually want to know and verify that the information is from a professional?
Yeah, so I guess, look, and I'll be honest, I don't know a hell of a lot about WebMD itself apart from that it's like, I'm pretty sure it's just like research articles, right? Like,
I got no idea.
Yeah, cool.
The
concept.
The people
yeah, so you can Google answers. The problem is you
Yeah.
don't know where it's come from.
Correct.
And there's so much shit out there. That's why they call it Google, Dr. Google. And how much credibility is that? And if that was the height of credibility, why would you ever go to someone, right?
Yeah.
So I think we as society know that just Googling something doesn't give like the height of credibility and doesn't make you feel comfortable knowing, all right, well, that must be the answer. So it's kind of almost this interim between Googling and actually going and getting a consult.
Yeah, I think we're in an era now when they speak about misinformation, but really we're in an era of over-information where there's so much information out there, and it's a wonderful luxury that we have that there is such a huge amount of information out there that everyone can access, which is fantastic. However, now we're trying to work out what of that information is actually credible and reliable.
Right. Enter ChatGPT and AI, which literally is making up stuff on the fly. And we don't know what's made up and what is not. I'm not sure if you heard on the news the other day that, literally the AI bot for Air Canada basically told a flying client misinformation, which led to them getting a refund that was against the Air Canada's policies. It was just wild, right? So the concept's there, yeah. But anyway,
okay, so we had this idea, and then now we've found
So it's like, how does this link to Atkins Health at all?
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, I applied to got in, did my ex-phys, got the degree, which was really cool. Yeah. I swear it was funny, eh? Like I found out that I got into the degree literally a week before the degree started, and I was over in America at the time. Wow. I'm pretty sure I was an afterthought, which is really funny. When we get to the end of the story, I guess. But anyway, got in, graduated, and at that point in time, I fell in love with actually exercise physiology and what it is that we can do as a profession. So I kind of put that whole idea we just discussed aside. And kind of was like, you know what, I just want to get stuck into being an exercise physiologist, and went looking for basically a job whereby I could get in, work under someone, and I guess learn how to do the gig and get a mentor and basically get better at my craft. The unfortunate thing is, as I looked, I couldn't find anything.
From a mentor point of view, or
from a job / mentor / everything I just discussed point of view.
Right.
So exercise physiology, when I graduated, although it'd been around for a while, it was not a really well-known profession. Yeah. So, you'd go and talk to even medical professionals and they would have never even heard of what an exercise physiologist is. So when looking for jobs, the only ones I could see were almost being what we now call allied health assistants for physiotherapists. And I didn't want that. I didn't just come back to university and study to become an assistant. I decided, you know what, this is shocking. There's so much power in this profession, so much good that we can do. but there's no private company out there leading the charge and hiring people. Or if there are, I didn't know about it. I couldn't find them.
So there's no EP-specific companies that only hired or mainly had EPs rather than physios and other allied health?
There was one on the coast that I could find, and they weren't hiring, and they were Q Rehab was the name of them. It's fine to talk about them. They were cool. They now no longer exist, unfortunately. But at the time, they were literally pretty much the only company I knew of, and in that they only had kind of 3 EPs themselves.
Really?
So
okay.
that's how small, I guess, the profession was. So yeah, pretty much no. So I decided, well, if no one's out there offering the help and the role that I would love, well, create it.
Yeah.
So funnily enough, I went and spoke to a company who was after contractors. I applied for the gig. They turned around and said, look, I think you'd get bored really quickly. Instead, we'll offer you a license agreement to their model, but you're going to have to go off and create a company and all this kind of stuff. So I was like, great. I was already in the process of that. Okay. Went and chatted to an accountant who sorted me all out. And then it was name time, right? Like, what are you going to call this thing?
Yeah.
And to be completely honest, at the time, I was like, oh, God, I got like every name that I came up with was so gimmicky and lame. And so like I got to the point where it was D-Day and I just had to have one, otherwise I wasn't going to be able to, sign the documents to do the licensing agreement and get cranking. So I was like, you know what, I just call it Atkins Health. No one's going to see it anyway.
Well, and people have heard of the word Atkins as well.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, they have, but that wasn't, to be honest, I was
not
naive
the intention,
to that. No, not the intention,
yeah.
And completely naive to it, to be honest. Ignorant probably is a better word for it. I didn't even think of that at the time. Like, it wasn't even crossing my mind. And yeah, funnily enough, that hasn't come up a hell of a lot, which is interesting. There's a whole story behind that, even in and of itself. But yeah, my whole thing was no one's going to see it. I'm just contracting to other companies anyway. They'll see the other company's name, and that name will just kind of sit behind everything. Yeah, and obviously that is definitely no longer the case.
No, absolutely.
But that's the story at the beginning, right? Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if that completely answers your question, but
yeah, and so interesting now going from the origins of that. You founded it, and then how many staff have you got now, and how many EPs have you got working under the Atkins Health banner?
Yeah, cool. So now we're at a team strong of 37. Which is pretty sweet.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Across how many locations?
6 locations and home visits as well.
Yeah.
So
it's amazing.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. It's been a journey.
Well, coming from, hey, I'm going to do this Uber service and driving
completely
out.
nothing to do
yeah,
with it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, it's an amazing story, mate. Because a lot of people have ideas, but not everyone either puts them together, executes it, or actually has the drive and the willpower to see it through. So it's a very epic journey, and I'm interested in that. Like, where is it now? If you look at Atkins Health mission statement,
cool.
What is driving the growth and the direction of the company at the moment?
Yeah, nice. I guess for me, I get really. I always like answer this question with almost like a pre-statement. I think vision, and you would have used mission for a reason, and I'll get to that. But I can't talk about our mission before I talk about our vision. And I know visions are usually given a real bad rap. They're the wanky term that's put up on the wall and no one ever thinks about or even looks at, yeah? For me, it's literally the reason that we exist. And as lame as this may sound, although I am the founder and sole owner, I don't see myself as that. I currently see myself as a leader and actually, funnily enough, like almost a protector of what this company is. And to be honest, I talk about it more as a movement than I do a company. So our vision is through innovation to revolutionize health. And I can't really say that again without explaining it further.
Well, I mean, it sounds good.
Yeah, sounds like a good thing to throw up on the wall.
So what do we mean by revolutionize
cool.
health?
Yeah, nice. So I guess for me, I look at Atkins Health as a vessel and a movement to make a change, right? So the reason I gave up the whole Uber idea of health and why I'm so embedded and engrossed and invested into this vision is because I look at society and I look at the industries that surround health, like so that you've got allied health, physical fitness, and medical industries, right?
Yeah.
I kind of look at all three of them, although delving with huge varieties of different kind of conditions, disorders, disabilities, dysfunctions, healthy people, all the rest of it, and huge, obviously, disparity in terms of severities. I think we're all out there for the same reason, which is to help improve the performance of the human being that is our client/patient.
Yeah.
So PT working more with healthy population, trying to get performance outcomes. Health, allied health, trying to take someone from more of a rehab or medical like condition through to being more focused, I guess, on performance outcomes is I guess the journey that we're trying to achieve there. And the medical world is obviously trying to help solve or fix medical issues to get them able for the health world to take them to performance, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's all looking at it, I guess, the way that it currently is. We're not even getting into the whole preventative versus reactionary health, which we could do a whole another podcast on.
Yes.
But for me, coming back to that vision and why revolutionize health, we as a society are getting so intelligent that we're producing such huge advancements in technology, and most of what we look at in terms of industry and society has greatly improved. Whether that has had a good outcome on society is a whole other question. But if you look at technology, if you look at law, you look at like all these other industries, like they're ultimately progressing.
Yep.
Sport, people are getting faster, stronger, etc. Right? Whereas I look at health, and again, this comes down to what you would judge success in health to be. If you look at life expectancy, for sure, we're living longer, right? Like
Yeah.
that's a thing that's happening. There's no doubt about that. But if you look at a lot of the metrics and the statistics that come out around conditions and living healthy periods of time or healthy lives, we're actually doing a really piss poor job.
Right, and I've heard that the difference between lifespan and health span.
Yes, right.
And although we might be increasing lifespan, health span doesn't seem to be increasing that much. Your ability to actually be mobile, do the things you want, be happy and healthy.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, it's that I want to tackle and use Atkins to kind of help with. And I guess that leads to the innovation thing, right? That other word that's important in that vision statement outside of revolutionize, which is I find a lot of people in our industry tend to do what has been done, right? Evidence-based practice is something that's glorified and almost pushed on to us from university. You must do evidence-based practice and all the rest of it, which is good. And don't get me wrong, I'm not shit-canning that because I think that's really important.
Definitely.
But I think we do have to question it. And, when you look at how long it takes for evidence to get out to practice, we're talking like, I think the latest stats I saw was 21 years.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, man.
Really?
It's an absolute...
From when the research has
originally
been
comes out, like when an idea gets founded in research to when it actually comes in and embeds itself into practice.
Right.
It's like 21 years, man.
Right.
It is wild.
Really?
Yeah. So for me, and even if I'm not 100% right there, it's an absurd amount of time.
Yeah.
And it's growing dramatically.
Even half
of
of
time.
that is ridiculous.
Outrageous.
Even 10 years from when, okay, this is peer reviewed, this
100%.
is strong statistical power, it shows this causal effect.
Right.
It's still 10 years.
It's a long time.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So for me, I'm like, righto, well, if I'm doing things that we've already done before, how can I expect to get any different results and therefore revolutionize self?
Yeah.
Right. So this innovation space becomes really important to us and our movement. Yeah.
Definitely.
So, yeah, I mean, I could talk about that for ages and how we go about doing that, but
No,
that's
but-
our vision, man. That's why we live.
And it makes sense because you then have very much tied that innovation, changing the game view to your internal teams as well.
100%.
So it's not just on the external with the clients. So, and I'm curious to hear how you set up the internal dynamics differently within your team in terms of the performance structures that you've put together in Atkins.
Yeah, cool. So I guess for me, I'm a big quotes guy, right? It sounds a bit weird, and you know that, I know. But for me, I recognized quite early on in the piece that my memory wasn't amazing. So I looked for ways in which I could remember really valuable pieces of information, and that's where quotes came into my life. I was like, yeah, that's a cool quote. I'll remember that. And from that, I was able to kind of consume a lot more information and knowledge and retain it, and better yet, implement it. I'm one of those people who find it interesting that, there's comments out there like, if you want to be successful, you must read 200 books a year and all this rubbish, right? I'm like, okay, so you're wasting all your time reading. How much of that are you actually putting into practice?
Yeah.
Like, learning is one thing. Doing something with that knowledge is another. So that becomes really important. To come back to the quotes piece and why it relates to my internal team is that I'm a huge listener, and lots of people will talk about the team, right? Like if you talk to any business owner anywhere, if you go through a whole conversation talking about business and the team, or in some other people's words, staff, doesn't come up, I reckon I would bet my life on the fact that just doesn't happen. Yeah, right. Like everyone talks about staff and team, right? Particularly when they talk in business. And it's really interesting because what I noted is that a lot of people say things but don't act accordingly. And I guess the specific of what I'm talking about here is when companies turn around and they say, your team is your greatest asset.
I was going to say, one of the quotes that I've heard you say is my number one asset is my team.
100%.
And would you then, did you say as well that it's also your number one liability?
Can be. So to me, it's like this is the whole thing, right? Like it's the business owner's choice as to how they work with their team, as to whether or not their team is going to be their greatest asset or greatest liability. To me, and they're on completely opposite ends of the spectrum, let alone the balance sheet and P&Ls, right? Like literally in every aspect, they're on the opposite sides, yeah? So when people were saying that to me and saying that quote, I was like, well, that's crazy. Like what makes a company have their team as being a really good asset, and what makes their team a team be a really poor liability, and I guess that got me deeper into thinking about, well, no, I want my team to be my greatest asset, right? Yeah. So particularly in a realm which is all about trying to help people, in health, yeah. So yeah, I guess for me, I started to delve and invest a lot of time, energy, and effort into that, and I think that almost is almost the important piece, yeah. Like that starts everything, yeah. Like name one thing in your life that you stick to consistently, whereby if you input a lot of time, energy, and effort into for a long duration in time, that it becomes a problem.
Yeah.
Pretty much never, right? It always, you like...
Yeah, definitely. And it comes back to what you value, right? If something is your number one asset, then it's probably connected to something that you value highly. And you're probably going to put a lot of time and energy and effort into it. And you could even use that analogy to health. Arguably, health is everyone's number one asset. Should be, because it also could be the number one liability.
100%.
Which ultimately becomes a lot of people's fate.
Right.
The choices that they make around their lifestyle becomes a liability. So I find that really interesting. I love that quote that people are your biggest asset, right? And so I'm curious now with the large team that you have and growing that, how have you looked at especially acquiring new talent, new assets as team members? How do you view that differently now than maybe when you first started off?
Yeah, it's done completely different, right. To be completely frank. And I think that it almost has to happen that way, just with the evolution of a business going from themselves or one-man band through to, hiring a few people through to, all right, now I need a little bit of back office, an admin person, first person that I've hired that doesn't create revenue, like, is everything going to be okay? Through to, all right, no, like, let's make a thing of this. Let's develop, some structure and multi-levels of management and all of those things kind of come in, right? And throughout that, you're obviously increasing your risk, which I'm sure you're going to talk to very soon. At the beginning, a lot of it, because it was done by me and I was managing everybody, to be completely frank, it was a lot to do with intuition. It was, well, if these guys, I'm going to work with these guys and girls, I want to make sure I like them.
Yeah.
Right?
If I like them, I can work with them.
Right?
I like it. Makes sense.
And so for me, particularly, well, I'd almost say in most industries, I can't say all, but skills can be taught, yeah? Personality and behaviors and the way people are and the way that they react. This is a topic we talk a lot about, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure you're going to go into it, but
sure.
that is less so, right? So that's
but I like that, and because I think some people might skip over that. So what you're saying is that skills, and what do you mean by skills can be taught? Compared to personality is innate and somewhat generic.
Yeah, cool. So later learned that personalities are generic, right?
Wonder where you learned that.
Yeah. Some guy, for the record, you obviously. So I guess for us, we developed this together, which was awesome, right? I had this idea, and you obviously had the similar ones over here, and come together, and you, with your background in psychology, was able to articulate and help me kind of get to the structure that we now have. And I guess, that concept of a person and breaking that person down almost into, we've got personalities, we've got behaviors, and we've got skills, and we've broken them down into these 3 areas. Have I forgot any? Are there the 3 areas that we broke them down in? Have I missed one?
You said behaviors,
yes,
skills,
yes, and personalities.
Personality,
yeah,
that's good.
We're good. All right, I passed. So personalities obviously being that generic factor, behaviors.
We're talking about trait personality for all the people out there that might be like, what is it? Yeah, trait personality, yeah.
And then moving obviously across the behaviors and then through to skills. So the further you go towards skills and away from personalities, the more someone else can influence, right? You can be trained and upskilled on, So the way I explain it is, were you born an exercise physiologist? Well, absolutely not. I had to go to school. I had to go to university. I then had to, learn from my mentors. I had to learn these things. But when I learned them, I could put them into practice, and I became more skillful at all the aspects that delivered a good exercise physiologist. To break it down even further, a skill of prescribing exercise. I can teach that. You can go to university, learn the basics, and then I, as a mentor or leader, I can teach you how to prescribe exercise well based on a presentation from another human being. Behaviors, a little bit more innate, right? Not completely, and can still be taught. I guess facilitated is a word we use a lot. And that's through obviously this positive and negative reinforcement and all those kind of aspects. It's just like, well, this is great behavior. This is what's going to lead you to promotion and progression. Whereas personality traits are a little less so. Like those, as you have educated me on, is you're born with that stuff. There's not much that you can do about that. So as I learnt that throughout my professional career, although not knowing the actual what I was learning until we joined forces, I started to kind of see these trends in which I could train people well, or I couldn't train people well. These problems that were occurring that were inhibiting our growth versus promoting it. And I guess I started to look at, all right, well, I want a system whereby I can look at the internal performance of my team, break it down into these kind of people-orientated kind of skills, the behaviors that their people are exhibiting, focusing on that stuff, not the personality stuff, because that's what I've hired in the human that I've hired internally, but also be able to go, all right, well, there's a gap here.
Yeah.
Let's go find that in somebody else and be able to do that through obviously the interview and that
Yeah.
whole hiring phase. So I guess that's where along with utilizing the personnel, my assets in the team to have these interviews, where it's gone from just to catch up with me and my intuition through to I guess a far more sophisticated way of making the decision as to who's going to join our Atkins Health family.
Yeah, because the thesis behind that was that, because when people use the word traits and personality traits,
sure.
and they're like, what does that actually mean? And
Yeah.
I think the terminology that we like chatting about is that everyone's got these sort of strengths and interests.
Yeah.
Stuff that they find interesting, it's just the way they're set up, and strengths that they just naturally are good at. Right?
Absolutely.
And what we've chatted about, if you look at extroversion, for example, everyone finds that an easy one. And you have this sort of conditioning genetically that says that, I kind of like being around people, I like talking to people, I get energy from people. And so you have an interest to engage in people, and people higher on the end of extroversion also have an interest to go do it. They're interested and they have the strength to do it, right? But doesn't mean that they can predict behavior.
No.
So then behavior is this sort of Venn diagram thing of context and time and setting and everything like that. What I found interesting, what you brought to is going, am I hiring based on the experience and the skills they have? Or is there a better way for us to get the most out of people in the right spot? And I'm curious of how you then came to that idea of going, should we even look at purely experience and skills? Or can we start actually teaching that a little bit better based on their strengths and interests and personality?
For sure. And I guess for me, what I term that, and what I've termed for every day is that genius mode.
Yeah.
We're trying to find people and get them in a place where they're doing things they like doing and things that they're good at. So for me to come back to the reasons and my journey on finding that was, I ended up hiring a lot of new grads.
Yeah.
Right. So typically speaking, you would expect for them to have really low skill sets and experience, because they have low experience, right? Being straight out of university. And what I found is that when I invested my time, energy, and effort into these new grads, in terms of trying to help them develop the skills, I was able to get them to perform to what I would consider really high standards in terms of client care and actually outcomes for results that the client was looking for in a really short amount of time. And that kind of made me look at, all right, well, these guys are really inexperienced and they're producing great results. I wonder what would happen if I went and hired someone who was really experienced.
Yeah.
So I went and did that. And what I found was that it didn't actually benefit the business in any way, shape, or form. What I mean by that is the product of their work and the standards that we set in terms of the production or outcome, for client care and clinical outcomes, was no sooner met by the experienced person than the inexperienced person.
That's interesting, because most would think it'd be the opposite.
100%.
What do you feel accounts for that?
It's as in the reasoning for that.
Yeah.
Because I think, particularly in our profession, where very similar to psychology, we're here for somebody else. And the whole thing, I've developed a model that I think is really important to achieving success, right? And that model is, so the four most important things to developing success. And I developed that over countless hours of actually watching podcasts and listening innately to, like, and really deeply to not just the answers and what they were trying to teach, but how that was similar across hundreds of different people doing completely different things. From a guy who climbed Mount Everest to a person who meditated for times on end, or created the fastest $1 million business, or like completely different, from physical to psychological through to business prowess, like. And I started to look at these people and started to think about them in terms of, well, what do they have in common? Yeah, and is there anything in common? And what I found was that their behaviors were very similar.
Right.
And what they did was they were very consistent with whatever it is that they were trying to be good at. They had a plan, and they were so determined and stuck to that plan like nothing could get in the way, right? So consistency and compliance to their plan were by far the most important things that was similar across all of these random people who were very successful. Then after that became technique, or the way they did it. So it was only the third thing that kind of, when we started to bring in the popular terms that everyone focused in on, right? If I use exercise as an example, well, what's the perfect technique to a squat?
Right.
That was only the third most important thing, nowhere near the top, right? And an analogy that I use to explain that is, you can have this guy that goes to the gym every single day, lifting weights like an absolute muppet. Looks like an idiot. You know the guy. He's in everybody's gym. But he still gets strong.
Yeah.
And he still gets big, right? Because he rocks up every day.
Might have some injuries, but
yeah,
put on size.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not saying that technique is not important. And could he have got bigger and stronger faster if he had good technique? Absolutely.
Definitely.
But the fact of the matter is, he got there.
Yeah.
The guy who comes and rocks up and does the exercise perfectly once every month ain't ever going to get there.
It's a great analogy.
Right? And so it's important, but not as important. And the third one is progression. So you must progress.
Yes.
You can't just keep doing the same thing and expecting to get better and better and better, right? You must progress the difficulty or whatever it is that you're doing to essentially continue to grow at whatever that is.
Which fits your hypertrophy model of muscular growth.
It does.
Right?
It fits
you have
it perfectly.
The same load over an 8-week period, then the muscles get used to that load, and then there's going to be less growth.
They create the adaptation necessary to lift that load.
Yeah.
That's what they do.
Yeah.
And then it works it out. And then it doesn't need to grow anymore.
And do you feel that analogy applies to team as well?
Pretty much everything, man.
Yeah.
I haven't been able to find anything that doesn't actually apply to yet. And I guess this alludes or relates very closely to that behavioral thing, right?
Mm.
So these two are more technical. These two are very behavioral.
Mm.
Like, can someone stick to it and stick to it long term and have a plan and not falter when barriers kind of smack you in the face?
Yeah.
And if you can, you're more than likely going to succeed in whatever it is that you want to succeed in. Then it's about finding these other two.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's a beautiful model. It works across the board for sure. So what have you changed and innovated with the team of late? I know we've been chatting about sort of this model of changing the way not only hiring goes, but also internal teams. And I think that's a really unique. I haven't seen many other organizations do it the way that you do. And I'm interested the theory that we were chatting about, if you could speak to it. And I like the basketball team analogy.
Yeah.
If you could speak to that, how you saw teams working when you started expanding across locations in particular.
Yeah, nice. So I think it's fair to say that we developed. You had a huge part to play in developing that. So I want to say thank you for that. So I guess it comes down to what is a high-performing team, yeah? And for us, we look not just in our industry, we look out of it. And as you are very well aware, working with sporting teams and stuff yourself, sport is a fantastic analogy, and there's a huge amount of crossover between sport and business.
It's performing at the end of the day, whether it's in the water, on a tennis court, in a boardroom, it's still performance.
100%. And so for us, it was delving into this genius mode concept and kind of recognizing, okay, well, why do I and my GM work so well together? It's probably because we've got very different strengths and very different weaknesses. And, you hear that a lot, right? Hire for your weaknesses, not just trying to find a mirror for you to stroke your ego and get somebody else who does your job, because what's the point? You do that when you want to replace yourself. A really good quote I heard from a business mentor the other day was, you hire originally for your weaknesses, then you hire for your strengths. And you hire for your strengths when you want to get out.
Well, yes.
Which I thought was really clever. I haven't heard that second part to that for a very long time. But to come back to the internal team. So what we did is we started to build some structure around this and go, righto, well, if we're trying to develop a really high performing team and we've got this concept of genius modes and strengths, what is this like? And obviously we went straight to sport. Yeah, and like you mentioned, I think basketball is a perfect example because it's a small team. I believe there's 5 on the court. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, let's go with that. Yeah,
Pretty sure.
Yeah. But the idea of it is that each and every person on that court are very different, and their roles are very unique. Yeah, you got a point guard, a shooting guard, a center, and each of them have very different jobs to do and play. Yeah. And not only do they have different jobs to do and play, different skills that they had to acquire, what you find is that they're actually structurally different people.
Yeah.
So
literally from the physique.
Literally from the physique.
7 foot, yeah.
Right? Like you don't have, a center who's, 6'3". They're those, which I know sounds wild because 6'3" is pretty tall, but, in basketball, you're talking, 7 feet kind of stuff. So you've got that genetic personality side of things that are coming into play. But you'll also note that they have very different behaviors, in a basketball team. Yeah. Even when you look at different people with the same role, right, across different teams. Yeah, you can have a point guard here, a point guard here, a point guard here, and a point guard here, and 3 different teams. Yeah. And although their role is the same, the way that they do it is very different.
And that can change within a season,
100%.
Change within team, change within the division, depending on the scope of the play.
Exactly.
Yeah. You can play that role in multiple different ways, depending on what the team needs.
And that's exactly right. It's the dynamics of the entire team. So we started to build some structure around this. And we started to actually spend a lot of time, energy, and effort in our number one asset as to figuring out how we can pool these assets in the best configuration to deliver the best outcome.
Yeah.
How do we get each and every one of these people working in their genius mode so that the outcome is a win, I guess, for the company and each of the individuals within it?
And the genius mode is the individual's innate strengths and interests.
That's right, yeah.
That then also lay over the skills and behaviours that they've developed.
Yeah, and obviously more so behaviours and then skills, because again, skills can be taught. Yeah. But it's which of those skills do they like to produce more often than the others, yeah? So someone might be able to shoot, but the behavior might be like, well, I prefer to shoot with inside the 3-point line and not outside. Right? Yeah. So I'm looking at that and going, well, what team do I need a mid shot in?
Yeah.
Because this guy ain't going to be a 3-point shooter.
And I think that was the biggest shift, was going, let's actually map what type of players
we've got
and their skills do we have, and let's do that company wide and figure out what the gaps are in our team, and do we need to then potentially move someone who's very good in this area to another area. We've got too many centers here, we need it in another team here. Do we need a new shooting guard?
Right, exactly. And is this shooting guard amazing, but isn't around the right team to assist him to make the shots?
Yeah.
So it was a pretty amazing, I guess, experience. And as you spoke about earlier, or asked me earlier, it's not just about the company in a business of this size. It's actually about the individual locations too.
Yeah.
Which adds complexity.
So it's like multiple teams, and it's kind of like it's like like the EPL, I'm kind of thinking is the analogy where you're a club, but you've actually got different teams in different divisions throughout the English Premier League.
100%.
Because some of the locations are quite new and they're small, so it's a small team. And then you've got some big locations with some big teams, some big demands. And then you can move players around that. So it's like if Man U had teams in, all at the bottom, Division 5, and they've got teams up in
which
Premier League.
introduces a whole new dynamic too, right?
Yeah.
Like you may have a fantastic shooting guard that loves to hit 3-pointers.
Yeah.
When there's an established team.
Yeah.
So put him in a Div 1 team and he'll hit threes all day. But put that guy in a Div 5 team and he'll look like a Div 5 player. Which obviously, in our business sense is, well, who in this team is actually good at developing business, which are better at growing a pre-established business, and which are good at maintaining or managing a business large enough that growth isn't actually even an option due to space or market share or saturation or any of those kind of things. So, which all obviously aren't dramas when you're a small business and you've got the horizon that's in front of you and nothing in the way. But when you start to grow to this medium size that we're trying to battle through and into, these are all the things that start to kind of arise, which makes the game super interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And then I know that you've always liked psychometric testing.
Love it.
And we've chatted a bit about that. Do you feel that actually made this idea of yours be able to come into reality, to actually be able to work out who was good in what area, who had strengths and interests in certain areas, where their personality traits were?
It's a great question. I think the easiest way for me to answer it was it removed the need for my intuition.
Yes.
Which
is good.
Which is very good, right? Very good. Because I can't do everything.
But we can't do it across a huge...
It's impossible, right? And so, even if I did do all the hiring, which I don't, and kind of nor should I now, but even if I did, the biggest thing that I think is another revelation when your company grows in size and you have multiple layers of management is that it can't all stay in here anymore. Your team of managers need to all be on the same playing field. So if you're having something that is as important as hiring the right person, and you're like, that person I know is going to be good, but someone else disagrees, you're going to waste an incredible amount of time arguing over whether or not you should or shouldn't hire that person, or end up like a dictatorship without any kind of objective measure that can quantify really whether or not they're the right fit or not.
Yeah.
So I think when it came to psychometric evaluation, not only did it give me, like, I'm pretending like my intuition was perfect, which it was not. So not only did it teach me a lot about my team that I didn't already know, but that objectifying these kind of things that we're looking at made it really easy for a team of people to manage, particularly when you start to talk about trading in terms of different locations and things like that as well.
Moving people around.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, because I think a lot of people, when they hear of psychometric testing, they're going, oh, you're just evaluating these people for your own needs as the owner or the coach to go, okay, who do I put in there? And there's a component of, there's a bigger picture where we're trying to get the best out of team players and whatever. But what you just touched on there was, it's actually really important that the individuals know more about themselves and have the insight about how they work, because that insight about how they work is going to be more beneficial to them, because then they can see their own strengths and weaknesses, balconies and basements, as we've referred to it. So then maybe there's some things they can work on. But also there's an opportunity for transparency within teams, that co-workers, managers can better understand others to work better in the group as well. I think that bit gets sometimes missed, that greater insight and knowledge of yourself is only going to be more helpful and productive in high performance settings.
Oftentimes in society there's this whole kind of employee versus employer mentality, right? And it's like, why are you doing this? You're doing this to judge me. I think the easiest thing that I do that kind of highlights the value of doing this to the candidate or the individual is, I was to turn around and what if I turn around to you, Tom, and I said, hey, we could find out a lot of information about you, right? How you like to work, the behaviors in which you like to employ in work, things you enjoy doing, things you don't so much enjoy doing. Now we can figure that out. And what if I could tell you that by finding that out, I could make sure that I'm putting you in an environment that capitalizes on those things, right?
Yeah, I'm going, that sounds great, Toby.
Let's do that.
Yeah, I don't really know why I started doing admin and I just sort of fell into it and I guess I'm good at it.
Right. So if I take the other approach or the other concept of, this is all for the employer, yeah? And I turn around and said, okay, what if I could get all that information from you, right? Let's say I did anyway, yeah? And I found out that you were horrible for the job in that all your strengths are not needed. All your weaknesses are going to create problems for you in this role. And then I said, but I'll still hire you.
Then I'm going, I don't
What
know.
the hell for?
Yeah, am I wasting my time, your time?
Right?
Yeah.
So it's this weird concept of, right, like the whole idea of a successful team is one that everyone benefits from, yeah? Like it's where the player loves to be there.
Yeah.
And the coach loves to have the player on board, yeah? It's about finding, like, if you don't know your genius moment, or even if you don't know your genius moment, like let's just say that you never found out the information, right? And I kept it all to myself. We found out, but I kept it all to myself. Wouldn't you want me to understand who you are and what you like doing? And hopefully you would trust me enough to put you in a position that you're going to be successful. I mean, it'd be stupid for me not to, right?
Exactly.
So I think it's weird when people challenge the idea of psychometric evaluation or they try and fudge the test. It's like you're literally trying, I mean, the good ones you can't, as you know, which I'm sure you like.
Yeah.
But it's crazy. Like, why? Like, why would you want a job that you're not going to enjoy?
Yeah.
Or you're not going to fit in well, or you're not going to be able to perform well to? And it's not about again, we're not talking here about skills. We're not saying you're not good enough. We're saying you what is required in this role, you actually prefer not to do.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, and that's the thing. I don't know what the exact numbers are on the percentage of time that we actually spend at our job, but it's a
crazy amounts of time, right?
Massive amount of our life, our weekly time is in the workplace.
For sure.
And so that underlying thesis was that, well, if people enjoy what they do more, and therefore if they enjoy it, it means that they're interested in it. Potentially they're good at it too, so there's an interest and strength balance. But generally, you like stuff that you're good at.
And even if you don't, you're interested enough to want to get good at it, right?
Yeah. There's this intrinsic motivation to do it more because you find it interesting, and generally stuff that you find easy, you also find somewhat interesting as well. But what that then connects to is productivity. People that are more intrinsically motivated, which is just a nerdy way of saying that you are interested, have a higher connection to what they're doing, right? So they're more engaged, right? And more engaged people in what they're doing perform more and are more satisfied with life. So if we go to the end, it's like, let's get people that are performing better and are more satisfied with their life. How do we do that? And one, it's putting them in a position that they actually like and they're good at.
Do you know what's really interesting as you're talking there? What are you almost doing? You're saying that they're interested in it, they're more likely to do it, right? And do it well, yeah? Consistency.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And they're going to do it well. They're going to stick to the plan because they're going to want to stick to the plan because they enjoy doing it. Compliance.
Yeah.
So we've only got technique and progression left. Technique is skill. We can teach it and then progressively make them better at it. So that's, when we talk about success, and I talked about my 4 things, it literally leads back to that performance and that behavioral thing. So it's all the same.
It's all connected. And now that you've implemented it, what have you noticed in the company around implementing, putting people in positions where is far greater connection to their innate strengths and interests.
Yeah. So I guess we're still in the journey,
Yeah.
and I don't think we'll ever stop doing that, to be honest, because people evolve, change. Maybe not the personality trait side of things, but their engagement and their motivation and their interest will change over time, right? They may get pregnant and have a child on the way. Okay, so that's going to they know that's going to change their life, and so therefore they may get more engaged or less engaged, to what they're doing at work. So all these things are obviously, it's a moving piece and a moving beast. To answer your question, it was a massive journey. It wasn't easy. I don't want to kind of sugarcoat this.
Yeah.
It was a tough time. We had to let people go who we didn't realize actually just didn't fit our team, but they didn't. And sure enough, they weren't necessarily performing to the standards that we were. On leaving, it enabled the rest of the team to kind of facilitate their own growth, and everything kind of just worked in well. So I guess the answer to that is that second piece, is that, they started to and have started to perform more, but perform more organically, which I think is a really nice concept and thing not to miss.
Because they want to, because they're intrinsically motivated,
Right.
they find it interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And 100%. There's nothing more.
And
really
that
to
even
add to
changes within the projects that they do, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like you could have two engineers that have the same amount of experience, the same amount of skills, but one might be more interested in, say, people, and one might be more interested in the data.
Exactly.
So let's get the person that's interested in people to go sell the bloody thing, and let's get the engineer who likes data to do the data grinding and whatnot.
I mean, it sounds obvious, right? Like it
does.
sounds super obvious, and when we talk about it, it's like, this is not rocket science. This is simple. I mean, it's like simple yet difficult, I think is probably the easiest way to explain it, The concept is simple. To put it into practice when you're dealing with people can be quite challenging and difficult. But the result is so worth it. Just like everything in life, right? Exercise, it should be simple. The movement is fundamental to our existence. But we got to put some difficulty on it. We got to put some load on it. Because when we put some load on it, we create some difficulty, and that's what creates that adjustment and that growth. And growth is one of the 6 needs that I talk about a lot.
And I think, because people ask me a lot, like, how do I get people more motivated? You motivate the teams more and whatnot. And well, of course, there's extrinsic motivation. You can pay them more and see how long. I mean, that motivates to some level, but it's, at the end of, I can take this back. So intrinsic motivation is the thing that's going to be sustained long term. But really what that is that the individual is actually enjoying what they're doing, and they feel a sense of autonomy and choice over their career, their employment journey. And I think that's the other thing that wraps into it, is that by showing them their personality profile, empowers them to go, oh, yep, that's definitely what I'm about, blah, 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 blah. And then to say, hey, you really are good at these things. Do you like these things? Yeah. Would you like to do more of this? Come on. Yes. Let's do it. So that then, and we're talking about autonomy and choice here, which is massive drivers. You're going to get them building their own fire, right? Which is a better way maybe of saying that they're more motivated, right? Because they like doing the bloody thing.
It's like to talk more on that too, right? It's less costly, to be completely honest with you, because if they're self-motivated and they're out there doing it themselves, you can probably reduce your costs in management, because you're not having to crack the whip every time to get them to do something. Or even if you don't reduce costs in management in terms of actual dollars and figures, your managers can go off and do more productive work themselves, because they're not having to micromanage their team, which we all know is a horrible statement or horrible thing to do. So look, it makes such incredible sense. And, when we talk about internal versus external motivators, I think, when we talk about money, which is obviously the one that comes up most, a few little quotes come to my mind really quick. And usually it's money. Money is the last thing people think of once everything else has failed, right? So usually, whether or not they're conscious of that or not is an interesting concept. But most of the time, when money becomes a problem, it's because actually they're not fulfilled at all. And instead of looking for a reason to grow, they're looking for a reason to stay. So I think external motivators such as money is a defensive tool, because you're preventing someone from leaving. You're not encouraging someone to do better, right? Never are you turning around and going, I'm going to pay you 90K, now be 90K worth.
Yeah.
Right? Normally that conversation comes up when someone's like, hey, I kind of feel like I'm worth more.
That's interesting.
And
yeah,
you're like,
it's the other way around.
yeah, okay, maybe you are. Like, let's figure that out. And then it's a defensive thing, yeah? Whereas internal motivation is figuring out what it is that drives them. You know, what makes them come to work every day? What makes them perform better than the person next to them? What is that strength that they want to lean into and grow? And I think that when we focus in on those internal motivators, that's where we get to see, and if we can create a team of internally motivated people, that's when you start to see some pretty insane, crazy growth. So, you know, I think one of the biggest things that you know, I talk a lot about and we speak a bit about is that psychological safety thing, which I don't know if you're leaving that for another time or itching to bring it out here, but you know, one of the things that I was talking to my team literally about today, I said, look, psychological safety is such an important piece, so important, and we need to make sure that we are always aiming to do more and better at it. However, I don't think it's alone. I think we need to give people that freedom to fail and learn and grow, and feel okay to do that, you know, which is that whole psychological safety piece. But we also need to inspire. As leaders, I feel we need to inspire people, not motivate. Because again, I feel like motivation's almost like I don't know, it's weird that I say it's got a bit of a negative tinge to it, but it's like, you know, even the question that you get asked, how do I motivate my team? You know, it kind of infers that they're not motivated now.
Yeah.
And then not doing something, and that there's a problem, you know? Whereas for me, when I turn around and think, well, how do I inspire my team? You know, it brings up, I guess, a different feeling in me. I'm like, all right, cool. Like, my team are great. They're awesome people. I've got great assets here, you know, within my team. And you know, I'm working hard on trying to put them in their genius modes and their strengths, and playing around in those areas. But how do I inspire them to take that extra leap? How do I inspire them to step outside their comfort zone and look and fight for growth? You know, instead of trying to motivate them per se, if that makes sense. I'm not sure if that kind of...
Yeah, and it's so prescriptive.
It is.
Right? It's saying that I know how to give and do something to you that I'm going to prescribe to you, then you're going to go and do it.
Yeah.
Rather than going, well, you've got it all in you. Because I feel that's what inspiring is.
Exactly.
Right? It's like, how do we do this together rather than... You're the owner, the CEO, and I'm the employee, and there's an other here. It's like, you know, how do we grow this together? No, I like it, mate.
Thank you.
And if I could backtrack or connect slightly back to the comment you're saying about the asset and the people being your asset.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it is interesting with the liability
Big time.
side of things. And we've spoken in length about building the assets that you have, which is the people and being on that journey and connection together. On the liability side, I'm curious, have you calculated, estimated the true cost of a bad hire? I'm not going to ask you if you've had a bad hire. I think most founders, CEOs have had some challenging stuff there. But I find it interesting, and I've asked this to a few different owners and CEOs, around what would you estimate the true cost of a bad hire at?
It's interesting, right? So I think to answer this as in true Toby fashion, I need to waffle a little bit first. And the first waffle, I guess, is kind of saying like that. I think there's two different aspects of expense or cost that you can apply. You know, there's a direct cost. And there's the indirect cost. And the indirect cost talks, you know, a little bit about the opportunity lost, not just the actual tangible dollars and cents that you see. Yeah. So obviously we all know, or those that are in the game of hiring, we understand that it's a lengthy process. Yeah. So most of the time, it takes some time to actually be able to make a hire, from deciding that you needed to hire to actually getting the person to walk through your door and actually start work, right? And of course,
productivity has a cost associated to it. The loss of productivity as you're trying to do the hiring process.
Yeah, I mean, and that depends a lot on the systems and the structures and processes that you got in place. For us, we've kind of tidied that up a lot. We can see it coming. So again, like we're looking at utilization rates and all these other figures and numbers and data points that we've got. And we're like, righto, well, we're going to need someone in probably about 6 weeks' time. And we know that 6 weeks takes from making a decision on hiring to actually getting that person hired. So, we've got triggers in our business to kind of see it coming before it comes, if that makes sense, to make sure that we're reducing that productivity as much as you can. Most companies don't, right? So in answer to your question, your productivity loss of removing someone from doing business in their usual form to going out and having to do that hiring process. Because we're hiring so often, it's almost a permanent fixture of one of our roles is to be doing those things. So it's calculated, I guess, for us. But yes, there's that 6 week process of actually putting in. You've got going out and actually putting in ads. There's a cost to ads if you're going down the ad route. If you're not, there's the time, as we just talked about, that it costs the actual person, whether or not you have a good system or not, there's still someone doing the work, right? And that's costly. You then got to the interview stage where you again spending a lot of time involved in trying to get that right person. If you've got other systems in play like psychometric evaluations, external contractors that are involved in the process or not, there's a whole kind of gamut of costs involved in making the decision, if that makes sense. Then some companies have recruitment people, and that shit is expensive. Oftentimes for certain roles highly valuable, but there is an expense to play there. Then you finally get the person, right? And if they rock up in day one and you recognize that they're a bad hire, Jesus, whatever you've done, you need to really have a good look at. Because at day one, they should be pretty much the person you expected them to be, yeah? Day one, right? Then you've got the whole onboarding process. Now, this is where things might start to come up, right? And depending on the company, you may have an onboarding process or you may just go, all right, out to work, yeah? If you go out to work, you're in even more danger because there's no actual checkpoints to be checking in on the person and whether or not they are a bad or good hire, right? So now we're starting to talk about still direct costs, not even this indirect cost that I'm thinking about, right? Let's fast forward. We go through all the training, all the onboarding, all the everything, and then you find out that they're not the right fit, right? So again, we're using the term bad hire, and I cringe at it a little bit because I'm like, well, to be honest with you, you've just chosen the wrong person that fits your team, which goes back into the whole conversation we've just had in this whole podcast. So it's really kind of on you. You should have done your due diligence and figured out whether or not they fit your mold or not. And if you don't, suss out your process. But let's just say they did everything anyway, and we came to the wrong fit and change it, right, to the wrong fit. You've spent probably 6 months in figuring that out, right? And that's costing hiring process, that's costing onboarding process, if you've got one. That's costing in management of trying to improve that person, because you can't just decide to fire them for the sake of firing them. I mean, you hired them because you needed them, yeah? So that whole time frame thing can go nuts. And if you don't have onboarding processes, the chances are that you're going to pick it up within, that time frame. It's probably pretty slim to none. I know I've hired team members who, unfortunately, I put them in the wrong position. And I didn't find out probably till 9 months later.
Yeah.
So how much have I lost in that process in terms of expenditure and management trying to help that person develop the skills that needed when it really wasn't a skill thing? It was I put them in the wrong place. So if you want to figure, tens of thousands of dollars. Yeah. I don't know really how to give it an actual figure because it depends on the role, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And those who are helping. The intangible is the opportunity cost, right? You needed that person 6, 3, 9 months ago, however long it took you to figure it out. And you haven't had them. How many clients have come, if you're a service-based industry, who would have got good outcomes with the person that would have fit, who now no longer comes and sees you because they're the wrong fit and the wrong person to treat them? How many people have walked in and walked out your doors because you've hired incorrectly. It's getting blown out. Pretty crazy, right? So the cost is huge.
Yeah, and then potentially if there's cultural impacts, they could impact other people in the start in the team.
One hire may lead to actually the necessary of multiple hires because people have left because they're unhappy with the other people in the team. It's huge.
And then in certain roles, there's greater responsibility, potential greater risk, especially if they're in financial roles.
Definitely.
So what could that potentially cost? And then if there is in any PR roles, what is the outward view of the company?
Reputation. Can you get back from it? Like it's quite an intangible one. Really.
I'd be really interested if someone could go out there and actually do some studies on it. It'd be
a hard one to do studies on though, right?
Yeah.
Because purely because of all the things that we just discussed.
Yeah.
Like, do they have a process? Did they not? Did they find it early? Did they not? You know, what kind of cost is the role that you're hiring for? What kind of costs are the people helping with the onboarding? Like, it's just too varied, I think, to be able to put an actual number on it. But yeah, it's serious. You know,
well, and put the time
numbers.
and effort into working out who to put in your team, which is your number one asset.
100%.
So in closing, mate, I'm curious from your experience in people management, what do you think is the biggest learning that you've taken now being founder, CEO, managing all these different people? What do you think you've learned the most?
It's pretty basic, and something that I think, although it's basic and gifted to us from birth, nowhere near enough people lean into it. And I guess it's these two things here, mate, and it's listening. My biggest learning is that if you listen, not only are there people out there that are willing and actually wanting to teach you how to succeed in whatever it is that you want to do, but you'll also, by listening, understand the team that you are managing more. And instead of trying to work on your intuition and try and figure it out, they'll probably literally just tell you.
Yeah.
And if you actually stop and spend the time to listen to them, they'll likely tell you what you need to hear to make the right decision. So, yeah, I think being present and listening to every conversation that you're involved in would be the biggest learning.
I like it, mate. I like it. And if people wanted to change their health in an innovative way, how do they get in contact with the team at Atkins?
Yeah, awesome. So, you can contact us, I guess, through all the social media stuff. Or, well, not all of them now. There's bloody hundreds of the suckers. But predominantly Facebook and Instagram, just Atkins Health, and you'll find us, I'm sure. And then, just Google Atkins Health, and we should pop up. No worries at all.
Perfect. Awesome. Thanks for your time, mate. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Cheers.
Cheers, Ray.